Alrighty, the book is finished, and boy, oh boy, did it not get any better. It is freaking Sunday morning, and the kids, Kara's down for a nap, Junior, my 1-year-old's down for a nap, my 4-year-old is outside on his tablet. I have no idea what he's playing. I'm concerned. My husband's playing video games, and I escaped into our super messy room to be able to read and then record this video. Also, I still have my head wrap on, so y'all already know it's just real. Welcome to real life. All right, so I am about a third of the way through this book. According to Kindle, I am 37% done with this book. And it's not that I'm not enjoying it, but I'm like not enjoying it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the type of reader that when I start something, like, unless it's heinous, I need to finish it. I gotta find out what's happening, like, the end. And so just because I finish a book or just because I keep reading a book, that does not necessarily mean that I'm always enjoying it. And with this, I feel like I am very annoyed a lot of the times that I'm reading this book. And there are a couple reasons that I'm very annoyed. Like, first and foremost, I feel like at the beginning of this book, you kind of like come into the book and this is like an enemies to friends, or I should say a friends to enemies to lovers type, situation. And when you first come into the book, it's a little bit like, it's clear that the main like romantic interest and the two main romantic interests or whatever, the guy, the girl, that the guy really cares a lot about the girl, that he really likes her or whatever, but you're just not given a lot of like context or background around why he likes her so much. Like, there's like a couple pages, but you're supposed to believe that like he's like really, really into this chick or whatever. And so then like when the two of them interact in the beginning, it's a little bit like, okay, I see, but like she doesn't even know that he's like super into her. So whatever, something happens and there's a misunderstanding and they become enemies basically for like 10 years, and then they kind of like come back together. And I guess like a couple things like annoy me a little bit about the storyline. Like I said, I feel like they kind of wanted us to be like super invested in the fact that he really, really cared about her in like the first 3 pages of the book. And I'm just like, I mean, I believe you. Like, I'm assuming you're not lying, but I'm also not like super invested in this relationship. Like, we're only like 1,000 words into this book. Like, I mean, okay. I wasn't super invested for that to be like the heart of the story of like, he really cared about her back then. It's just like, okay, but like, why? Like, there's just not a lot of, I don't know. I just felt like I was not super emotionally invested. The other thing about this character is that she's annoying. Like, she's not like wholeheartedly annoying as a character. Like, I don't necessarily like dislike her, but she is like obsessed with her weight. And it's like in kind of like minor ways, just in terms of like how often it comes up in the book. So one of the big reasons why she feels like this, super hot guy could never like her is because she's always been, a little bit on the healthier side. And it's interesting because in the beginning, the main character who's white, and she's Latina, I think she's Mexican, but the main character who's white, he's talking to like these frat bro type friends, and they're like, blah, blah, she's fat, this and that. And I immediately rolled my eyes. I was like, fucking white men be out here calling women of color fat. And I'm like, girl, you thick, like you got curves, bitch, you fine. Like, and so I was automatically like, when I'm reading romance novels that like center like white characters, I just have to put aside the fact that I know that their body standards are very different than body standards in communities of color. So like when they're like, oh, she's fat, I'm like, she probably ain't fat. She probably just thick, or she has like a butt or whatever. Because somebody probably would have called me fat when I was in college, and like I wasn't, but I wasn't like thick, like model skinny or whatever. So that was one thing, but hearing kind of like from her, like the fact that she's always been a little bit like curvier than her sisters or whatever, and other people in her life, and that's been something that's like kind of been on her mind, and that played a role in what ended up happening to break the two romantic interest apart in the very beginning. So then you're fast forwarding 10 years, and now she's like trimmed down, and she, references a lot about like all the working out that she's done, all the work that she's done to try to lose weight and like get her body like into this, and how that plays a role in like her confidence and this and that. And like, I get it, right? Like, I get it. Like, I'm not mad that somebody decided, okay, let me lose weight. This is important to me. But it's like the reason, like the author kind of like makes it seem like, oh, like, she's learned to love herself. But I'm like, but she hasn't though. Like, she has not really learned to love herself. She continues to like, be obsessive about making sure that she's working out, making sure that her body is a certain way, this and that and this. And it's like, it's seeming like, oh, her body is strong and this and that. And I'm like, but is it though? Because like, really your whole thing, like, there's a scene where she talks about how she looks in the mirror every day to like look at herself naked, and how she's just like, oh, and how she just kind of is like accepts herself for what it is. But like, it's different, like accepting yourself and loving yourself. And that is very clear to me. Like, she may have accepted the fact that this is her body, but like, she does not love herself or her body. And the like constant just kind of like, oh, losing weight and going to the gym and this and that. And I'm like, that would be cool, except that like, it's kind of the way it's written is as if like she's moved on past this. And I'm like, but she's not. So why do we keep talking about this if like she's so past it, right? Like, if she's accepted herself, but she clearly is not. So anyway, that's annoying. And then also in this book, there are just a couple moments where the writing just feels so fucking corny. Like, there are two places that I actually highlighted. I'm not about to pull out my Kindle and like look them up, but like, one point she calls an app that she's describing like the ghetto garment. And I was just like, first of all, nobody says ghetto anymore. So like, what? And also like, that's really a very problematic word. So, I'm not going to get into that, but like, the work that I do is around anti-racism and classism. And there's a lot of racism and classism inherent in the word ghetto. So whenever I hear it, I'm just like, I roll. And so somebody being like, oh, it's the ghetto garment. I'm like, girl, bye. Then there's another thing where, one of the characters is talking to another character and talking about a basketball star who basically likes chasing women and doing drugs and this and that. And she's like, yeah, between chasing tail, like, drink and drugs. And I was like, did she really just say chasing tail? Like, this person is like 30 years old. I'm like, ain't nobody out here talking about chasing tail. Like, what are you about right now? So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna finish it, and I'm reading it, and it's not to the point where I'm just like, oh, I fucking hate this book, it's so terrible. But I have been annoyed most of the time I've been reading it, and I'll probably continue to be annoyed by these characters. And yeah, we'll see. I will report back at the end of the book. Oh yeah, so the other thing that I forgot to say about this book that was annoying, I forgot until I went to like sit down and start reading it again, is that she's in a relationship. When they meet back up 10 years later, she's in a relationship with a nice guy. Like, I already don't love books or romance novels where like the romance is predicated on somebody needing to like cheat or even emotionally cheat on another person. I'm like, why would you want this in a romance? But like, I understand it a little bit more, and it's still wrong, but like, I can, it's one thing when like they're in an abusive relationship, or they're in, a relationship with like an asshole or something like that. And it's like, even then, it's still wrong. Cause I'm just like, if you can't just end the relationship, like, and I recognize that's not true of all abusive relationships. So I'm definitely not saying that, because that can be a very complex situation to kind of extract yourself from. But if you're just in a regular relationship with somebody you don't really like that much, like, emotional cheating is wrong. And so I can't get into it like romantically. Like, I'm not about to be cheering for, the main romantic dude to be sweeping somebody off their feet when like they're in a relationship with like a nice loving partner. So I don't know, that also like is rubbing me the wrong way, and it's making it hard for me to be like, I really don't care if y'all get together. In fact, like, you're both kind of trash and right now in this whole like situation. So anyway, I'll let you know if things change towards the end of the book. Alrighty, the book is finished, and boy, oh boy, did it not get any better. Oh my goodness. This book is like, 1 star, no, that's harsh. 2 stars for me. First and foremost, like, once again, it was problematic all the way till the end. So I know I came in and I was like, oh, like I always find it really off-putting when like a relationship is based on, the main character's relationship is based on one of them having to cheat on a partner. I'm just like, what is romantic about that? Like, that shit is not cute. And this like just continued that theme in a very unabashed way, like to the end of the book, till like 80% into the book. And it was just problematic. But I think even more than that was just like ultimately the relationship between the two main characters. Like their whole deal, as they got older, was that she is supposed to be this like extremely caring, loving, generous, nurturing person, and he is an asshole. Like, and that's literally their dynamic. And they're like, we complete each other because we're opposites. Like, bitch, what? That is not cute. Like, if I cannot tell you how many times, like, there was one moment, and at this point, I'm about to go into some spoilers. So I'm going to pause right here and say, spoilers ahead. So if you do not want to hear anything else, just know that for me, this book was 2 stars. Their whole relationship was problematic. And then I will leave a timestamp for when I stop talking about spoilers. Now, onto this book. So there was legitimately multiple times when they would say something, either the author would write something like, oh, she's kind-hearted and like, I'm a jerk. I know that. And like, that would just be like this cute, like, oh, like I'm a jerk and like she knows I'm a selfish bastard and like this and that and this. And I just like, it just wasn't cute. Like, it was not cute that like his whole deal was that like he's this like selfish asshole and she's like this really, but he's nice to her. Now, if that ain't some white man shit, I stop. Because full stop, because once again, and I know I've said it before and I'll probably say it again on this on this channel, but having to do the work that I do around justice and this idea of privilege really comes with, intrinsically like individualistic mindsets where it's like, it's all about like me and how I feel and how I treat this individual person and not about like the principle of like how people should be treated. And this dude was basically like, yeah, he literally says at one point, like, I'm an asshole, but I'm not an asshole to you. What? And like her whole deal is that she's supposed to be this like super kind, nurturing person. And at one point in the book, like the whole like, second part of the book, it turns out her like longtime partner, who she calls her best friend, who she recently started dating, and they didn't have a fulfilling relationship, but he is the person that she's with when she meets back up with the main male lead, right? And at one point, like at the middle of the book, you find out that basically he gets diagnosed with this very rare form of cancer-like illness that is incurable, and he gets given like 6 months to live, and so she goes to live with him and take care of him, this and that and this. And there's literally a scene where she's telling Jared, who's like the hero in this, she's telling him like, look, I need to go live with him and like take care of him. His whole family is dead. Like his whole family is dead. He's an immigrant. He's like, whatever. I need to go take care of him. And he's upset about it. So then like they have like this really sexy scene and he's like, oh, like I want you to be like touching yourself like while you're like, and thinking of me tonight while you're with him. And while you're taking care of him. And I was like, sir, like, just, this dude is just a jerk. And like, no, he's not a jerk to her. But so many times he's like, oh, like, don't try to change me. Like, I know I'm selfish. Like, I know I don't care about other people. I know I'm an asshole. Like, this and that, this. And just like, that was supposed to be okay. And I'm like, that shit is actually just like, not cute to me at all. So he was a jerk. Like, she was real, just like problematic in multiple ways. Everything from like the weight thing kept coming up. And again, it's not that like she wanted, it's not that I'm anti like the idea of like somebody having and struggling with body. I have 2 kids. I understand this, like, or even wanting to lose weight or not feeling comfortable or struggling with your weight. I understand all of that. But I feel like my challenge was just that, like, the whole time, it was just such a focus for her. Like, she was on Weight Watchers, like, counting points. And it was like she never got any joy. Like, she never really accepted or loved her body. It was just like, oh, he loves my body. And I'm like, but girl, what about you? Like, at the end of the day, she got more comfortable with him looking at her body and making her feel sexy. But like, just the way she talked about exercise is like this thing she basically would drag herself to do, even though she had this high pressure job and all these stressors. And like, you know how she would count points every day and like deny herself like pizza after she like has this devastating breakup. But she's like, oh, and her friend comes over like, look, we can have these like, you know, popsicles. They're only 150 calories. And I was just like, is this really what we're talking about right now? Like, you just told your boo that you cheated on him and like y'all are best friends and also he's your client and like your whole world's down the toilet and you're like 150 calories. So it just became very clear that it was like such a fixation for her, and the fixation was all about losing weight. It was all about like losing weight. It was never about joy. It was never about feeling true joy or acceptance or love for her body. And that just bothered me. And like it was just so much. Like they talked about it all the time. So like all of those things combined, this book was just trash. And the reason that I gave it 2 stars, and I hate saying that, I shouldn't say this book was trash. This book was not trash, but I did not enjoy it because ultimately, like, the very premise of the book, just, I did not go for it. Like, the idea of, like, cheating and some sort of romance, the idea that this, like, and they kind of joke about it at one point because he talks about how, they're like at the very end of the book, there's like a moment where he's referencing something she said at the conference where she was like, look, you know, she was talking to a bunch of other women sports agents, which is the world that she's in, and was saying like, you know, look, she was like, you know, it's okay for you to want to have it all. And he references that back to her later on. And she kind of jokingly says like, well, given that you're a rich white man in America, like you kind of do have it all. And he was like, oh, did you just rich white man me? And she said, I did. And he was like, I'll let you get away with it this one time. And I was like, if you was my boo, like you be getting that all the time. Like you are literally just swimming in a sea of your own privilege. And the very fact that you think that it's okay for you to just be a complete insensitive asshole to anything that doesn't have to do with what you want, and that is some sort of like cute, like you can't change me, like it didn't work for me in any level. The only reason I gave this a 2 is because, to be honest, other than like some really corny moments like I referenced earlier, the writing was actually pretty solid. Like it was you know, although I was like rolling my eyes and annoyed most of the time, like the writing was actually really good. So if none of those things that I just said bother you, you might actually enjoy this. The other thing about this is that like the sex was hot. So like, I'm not gonna lie, like it was, there were some scenes in there. I was like, this is some, you know, 50 Shades of Grey type, you know, not in terms of like the bondage and all that, but I feel like oftentimes in romance, like, you know, they don't be talking about freaky stuff. They don't be talking about freaky stuff. And in this book, they did. And I just love their interactions. I love their like sexual interactions. It was just really like, I felt like that the chemistry as it was written was really well done. So for those reasons, I will give it a 2 stars. If you do not mind cheating as romance, super privileged white men, you know, body shaming, European body aesthetics around curves, and, you know, just ripe infidelity and assholeness, you might actually enjoy this because the story itself is not bad. The writing is strong and the romantic scenes, the sexual scenes are good. So, not my jam. Not my jam at all. In fact, I think I'm done with this author. The first book that I read of hers, I gave it 3.5 stars. I kind of enjoyed it, but there were some things that I didn't really like about it. Now after reading this, I'm like, no. I just think there are too many other, you know, authors that I think I might enjoy a little bit more. So this will be my last of her books.